Welcome to the Old Mac Gang Podcast, or OMG, a podcast or video cast, depending on how you're watching or listening to us, of a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to H-season users. I'm Marty Gensius, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I'm a 67-year-old H-season user who's collected a group of friends to talk about Apple and kinds of things that are going on in technology that can affect folks in our age ranges. Let's see who's on the panel with us tonight.
Good evening. My name is Bob Wood. I am in Tucson. I have been a Mac user since the early 90s, and I've been involved with local Macintosh user groups for almost that same amount of time.
I'm Gary. I'm glad to be here. I live in Cleveland. I'm 87 years old, and I may have two guests out there. I went to dental school today, and my dentist and my assistant, my other dentist, my son went along with us, and they may be watching us. So I'm working to get us a crowd, Marty.
That's good. That's really good.
Okay.
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm now a 78-year-old retiree, also living in Tucson and member of the Tucson Mac User Group. And I've been around the Mac since 1984, spent a lot of time with the Apple user groups in the Texas area, and then worked for Apple for about 9 years, and then worked for a university nearby, and then retired. And now I'm here and using an M1 Mac Mini, iPhone 16 Pro Max, Apple Series 6 Watch, and 9th generation iPad. So happy to be here.
I'm Peter. I'm 72 and live on the southern shore of Lake Erie in Bay Village, Ohio. I've used and occasionally abused computers since high school and settled primarily on ones built by Apple about 19 years ago. For the most part, they just keep getting better, and I'm eager to explore how they get better with this online gang. Find out where we're headed next.
Well, some news this week, just briefly. New developer betas came out for the latest release of the OSs. The 26 is what they call them now. And there was an iOS 18.6 beta that also came out with some minor tweaks and bug fixes. If you are running developer betas or interested in developer betas, it's been it's kind of advanced members of our group, but it is news. And they've done the whole change up with it to include the liquid glass display or interface, and they've changed icon shapes, and it's basically kind of a redesign. Not a lot under the hood, but there are some changes and interesting changes in major products, like the iPad has some interaction and interface that it didn't have on previous versions. And Vision Pro, the headset, also has some interesting additions to it. Not much really with that we can speak of with the current macOS version of the developer beta, and not too much about the iOS beta that we can talk about right now. It's got some cool stuff, but again, when it gets a full release, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about those different devices for our listeners. But that's the news. The developer betas are out, so things are moving along. Tonight's topic is AI, and we're kind of personalizing it because the questions are about how we use it or what we use in terms of AI. And the first question to the group, and then we'll have some tips. We always have some tips at the end of the show. The first question to the group is, which AI service or services do you use the most? What do you like about them versus the others? And how does privacy factor in here? And Chris is up first.
Okay, so thanks to my podcast colleagues here, I was sort of encouraged to look into this whole thing with ChatGPT back in December when we first started out the podcast. And I was going to wait for Apple's solution, and I decided just to dive in. And I've used ChatGPT kind of throughout, um, and I kind of default back to that. I've used Perplexity, and I like that as well. And we can get into more depth, but I principally use it for all kinds of questions. Um, just easy stuff like how do I turn on the screen reader in the Safari browser? You go search on that and support.apple.com, and you get about 19 different articles. All I needed was the simple instructions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So works great.
I agree with everything that Chris said. I do also. I started with Marty and Peter mentioning Perplexity, and I've used it constantly. I've also dabbled with ChatGPT. I would use it more if I could come up with some more projects, but I did use it recently. Maybe that's well, no, that's another question. All right, that's what I use. Uh, Chat Perplexity and ChatGPT.
I have not done many formal comparisons. I use a lot of AI, and I settle on what worked good enough at first, and I stick with it so long as it keeps improving. So what I have been using is Perplexity for search. For me, Perplexity has become a near total replacement for Google. Anything I would Google, I now perplex, whatever the verb would be that goes with that. And even more because I think it is a big improvement over Google, the same way that Google was an improvement over Alta Vista way back when. I use ChatGPT for conversational queries where I keep refining it for generating images and for brainstorming. Both of those, ChatGPT and Perplexity, I pay for. I got a great deal for a year of Perplexity, and I pay the basic fee for ChatGPT. Uh, for free, I use Gemini for Python coding, and I use that because it's so nicely built into a service that Google has called Colaboratory, which allows not only the generation of code, but easy sharing of that code with other humans. Claude has the best reputation for coding, but I have not yet jumped through the necessary hoops to patch it into my other code editing software that I use with other languages.
Well, I'm using Perplexity and Chat GPT and getting much better results now that Marty has taught us how to use verbose prompts. Uh, Privacy is a concern, but I need the help. I try not to give too much personal information in my prompts.
I am a ChatGPT paid user. There's a couple of things about that for me. There are a bunch of additional components that are useful for me with ChatGPT. The unpaid version would allow you to add some components, but you couldn't have kind of the full menu of items. And it's evolved over the years from 3.0 to 3.5 to now 4.0 and beyond in 4.E or something like that. Um, I've enjoyed using ChatGPT. I have learned how to use it, being one of the first ones that was really out there and prevalent. And I treat it very conversational. So I have a conversational moment with them. And it used to be I'd think about how to tightly put my question in and how to figure out how to make sure the question was clear before I submitted it. And now I just type and I just put in, I want this and do this. And oh, yeah, when you're doing that, do this. And it figures it all out. But, what I've learned is that you've got to put a lot in to get stuff out. Now, in terms of privacy, there is an option, at least for paid users, that you can go into your settings and you can shut off ChatGPT using your material for data or data for modeling. So I'm less concerned about anything that I put in it in terms of showing up in somebody else's search or being used for someone else's search. Doesn't mean I shouldn't have a concern. It just, I feel like I'm able to switch off so it's not using myself and my data for training the model. But that's the difference between free and paid versions of software. There is some encouragement for the paid version. Now they have a paid version that I think is, I don't know, $18 a month or 16 or maybe $20 a month. And then they have one that they're trying to sell me now, which is like $200 a month. Not going to happen. That's for like team use and all sorts of things like that. But frankly, I use it a lot, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So the next question is, what have been 1 to 3 of your more interesting queries or information acquisitions? How do these stand out versus past Google or DuckDuckGo searches? Are you saving the results elsewhere? So when you get your results, how do you save it? And we go back to Chris again.
Yeah, I'm still using the free version actually. I did provide a hide my address from Apple and an anonymous address so that, it does keep track of stuff. But one thing I did learn, and might be important to note, that when you have multiple, you can create new sessions in ChatGPT. But if you accidentally put two of them together, like start a new one along with an old one in a different subject, we can't split them apart yet. I asked ChatGPT itself about this today, and it said lots of users are asking, but we can't do it just yet. So that's something to think about in terms of making a new chat for a new subject. But my kind of breakout or breakthrough moment recently was I was working on something with my Duolingo French, and the construction just seemed totally backwards when it's where the object is the subject and so on. And so I asked ChatGPT, what's up with this? And it explained the whole thing. And I was like really kind of blown away. It's like, oh my, it can do French and stuff too now. And so then just yesterday, I was trying to ask ChatGPT about how can I keep my French and Spanish separate, because for various reasons I'm doing both and in Duolingo. And it offered that it could do comparisons and contrasts between the two languages with their respective Latin roots. And I said, well, that's great, because I took 2.5 years of Latin. So now it's sort of doing it trilingually. So, the availability of other language stuff and in terms of even be able to have conversations in a second language, pretty amazing stuff for me. And initially, I was saving stuff off to Apple Notes, and I still kind of do, but I like if I can organize myself properly with the prompts and with the separate sessions or chapters, if you want to call them that, then, that might be a better way to go, because you can rename these chapters in ChatGPT, which makes it a little bit easier if you remember to just start a new one and not have one continuous one. But the other thing I found out today, guess what? We can search inside the chapters of our various, or the sections of our various queries. So that's another huge plus in terms of having a record you can go back to and just do a unique string search and go back to the particular, session you want to access.
Oh, how do I follow that, Marty? How do I follow that? First of all, I'm okay with sharing information because I want information. And I feel today a lot of information about us is already out there. But when I want an answer, I'm willing to share information. And I used it recently, just an example. I wasn't sure about my right hip or a possible hernia. And I actually did have a conversation that we mentioned that with ChatGPT. And I took, amazing, either the summary or a part, I think the end of the summary, and copied it and sent it to my internist who read it. And because he had sent me to a surgeon to talk to just to see what was going on. So I'm finding whenever I'm in a need of a question, which I used to ask Peter or Marty or all my other friends, I'm turning to Perplexity or ChatGPT, and I'm getting answers that are providing me with more knowledge. As far as saving it, mostly I'm going back again. If I need to ask a question, I'll go back and start over. So that's where I am, Bob or, or Peter.
Yeah, I have a lot of things I've used, and I'll name a few. I really struggle with expressions of empathy and comfort to friends, and not particularly the body of it, but the opening and the salutation. And so I've queried ChatGPT to give me examples from the 17th century, from the 18th century, from the 19th century, just so it doesn't sound so corny and canned, and then ask them to bring those up to date and come up with some nice things that I'm happy with. I've used ChatGPT to create custom illustrations for all kinds of communications, like flyers for events and things like that. And I use Apple Intelligence, even though it gets a bad rap, to create emoji to punctuate texts and emails, a piece of pumpkin pie or a group of signs, just when my friend sent me a picture of them with some signs at some political demonstration they were at. I've used it to expand my list of candidate questions when people are running for city council or school board, and then running those questions back through saying, make sure they're open, neutral, and not leading questions. And I just suddenly remembered that last night I used ChatGPT to plumb through the Ohio budget. It was released last night after working hours. It's going to be voted on tomorrow. That doesn't give people much time to go through the several hundred pages of very new details that they're putting out there. And ChatGPT was able to go through and identify stuff that has to do with libraries, stuff that might have to do with schools, and things like that, including things that your normal searching on keywords might not find. Uh, and all of that except the Apple Intelligence I do with ChatGPT, and to find history and things like that, I just go in the ChatGPT sidebar and pull stuff out. Uh, I have also tested in the OS 26s the new shortcut automations, and it's really easy on shortcuts to pass a query to ChatGPT and then both display the result and store it into a new or specifically named Apple Note. I haven't gotten it to do conversations yet, but there's some potential for not only keeping a record but keeping privacy, because in the shortcut you can specify, is this going to the local large language model? Is it going to the one that Apple has in the cloud, or is it going to ChatGPT?
I've been using ChatGPT to create illustrations as well. May have been successful at making illustrations for my user group newsletter and for my photography workshop. Just today, I used Perplexity to look up restaurants and points of interest for my trip to Macstock coming up in a week or so. So that's helping me out there. Marty?
Yeah, I'm staring at the screen and I realize the old Mac Gang emblem or brand was actually made with ChatGPT as a generated graphic. So that's one use that I used it for. One of the things that I know you have to be careful with is sometimes you'll give directions to an LLM to create a graphic, and it'll create a graphic, but it'll also have like a lot of garbage words in it, or misspelled words, or things omitted that you specifically said that you wanted. I just managed to luck out with the brand picture that we have here with it. So that's one way. I still am working as a professor, and we'll see how long that lasts. But I'm enjoying it, and I have assignments with students where they have to do discussion comments on particular articles they've had to read. And I can expand all of those discussions, including the replies from students, and I read through them. But for me to take notes and summarize all that and things like that can be very time consuming. And I wind up getting into a lot of redundancy. So I've taken that document as a PDF and fed it into ChatGPT and asked for summary and major themes that came out of the discussion, and also maybe some questions that I can use in a large class when the class meets to be able to prompt them around the materials that they had read. So I use it that way and have used it that way. I also use it for strategic planning. I work with some associations, and when it comes to revise or revamp their strategic plan, they have an idea what they want in it. The ideas aren't well fleshed out, and the ways in which those ideas will come to flourish, and the timeline in which they're going to come to flourish, and who's going to be responsible for those aspects in the strategic plan. All of that I can put together and prompt ChatGPT to create those kinds of documents for me that I then take, put in Word, edit, and then they become a workable strategic plan. Generally, that comes out of what the organization sees as their priorities. And organizations often have incredibly complex priorities without the infrastructure to support it. And so I generally talk to the executive directors and the executive committee to say, give me your top 5 things out of this list of 20 that you want to have happen, and then run it through and come up with a strategic plan that's built around those top 5 issues with space to maybe put some other things in if necessary. I also use it for creating bylaws for an association. You can put models of bylaws in that are, models that you find particularly interesting, and maybe you can put in like as many models as you want. Actually, you can put 10 documents into ChatGPT at a time and have it model something from those 10 documents. And in this case, it would be something like, give me a set of bylaws for this particular association. And then you've got a working document that draws from all of the nuances that other associations have used to put into their bylaws. So you have a good solid set. You have a good solid skeleton, I should say, for the association that you're going to work with. Question also included, where do I keep my stuff? I do a lot of prompt engineering, and prompt engineering are complex routines that you run through LLMs that will generate whatever additional information you give it to generate on. So if I'm looking at creating a workshop on a topic like trauma counseling, I can feed documents in that cover those topics for me. Then I can put in a prompt that I've created that will walk me through responding to certain questions I need, like how long is it going to be? How many sessions are there going to be in this workshop? Is it an all, so I answer those questions. It takes the content and it creates a agenda for me with ideas of what to do in each parts of that. But it's a complicated prompt. I don't want to have to type that in every time. So I use a piece of software called TextExpander. And TextExpander is a pretty, and we'll have a link in the show note for it. It's a pretty well-known piece of software. And you can use it for all sorts of, you type in a couple of 3-letter codes or 4-letter codes, and it will expand the whole thing in. So I have prompts that I use regularly in TextExpander, and that's how I populate them into ChatGPT or other LLMs when I want to use them. So I do the results I don't have to worry about keeping because ChatGPT, if you do a different prompt, and Chris talked about this earlier, if you do a different prompt for each thing that you're going to do, it creates a separate request, and along the left side of it, you've got those separate requests. The thing that you can do, I think, with a paid account, I'm not sure with a free account, is that you can create folders. So if I'm doing a lot of results that are related to training, I have a training folder. If I have a lot of results that are related to using AI, I have an AI folder. So all of those searches can be organized into folders for me. So if I want to go back and scan a topic or get something that I knew I did a search on related to AI, I go to the AI folder to find it. So I keep it within that environment instead of having to find it somewhere else or in some document to copy and paste. Okay. Question number 3. What recommendations do you have for people who haven't tried an AI service or want to deepen their quests? Any specific suggestions on prompt engineering? And we start again with Chris.
Okay, well, Marty, we don't have folders in the free version, and that could be tempting because I'm reaching the point where folders could be pretty handy. So I can only speak from my own experience, and I would say dive in. Start asking some questions and see what answers you get. And as you ask questions, you will think of more questions, deeper questions, more involved questions, and see what happens when you start to specify, when you go from the general to the more specific, and see how that changes the answers you're getting out. Experiment. There may be follow-up questions, like ChatGPT will say, well, this out of this topic, I have 5 different follow-up questions. Try one of those and see where it goes. Yes, it can be a rabbit hole, but it also might be fascinating. And like Bob said earlier, mind your privacy. So we're just not 100% sure. Don't put anything in there that you wouldn't want later on to surface or something. Or find the anonymous or incognito mode, depending upon which LLM you're using, which service. There may be different ways of doing it, but they all have something. So, if you have just a quick random question and, you just want to throw it in there, you could use that. And we already talked about having an email address and tracking stuff. And let's see, what else could I say? Well, like they see in the movies, dream bigger. Try it out and see how it'll handle things. If there's research in your field, ask for what's new in that research and various things. And just experiment and get your feet wet, and then you'll find out.
Yeah, I think as Nancy Reagan once said, just do it. I'm for Chris, and I'm finding the more I share about using it and how in my life, other people pick it up and then they try it and find out, tell me later, hey, this thing works the way unexpectedly for me. So that's my advice or my suggestion. Just try it. Okay, now.
The recommendations part of that question reminds me of the classic, how do you help someone become computer literate question? And I've found that talking about computer basics rarely is the answer to that one. But finding an avid interest for someone and then connecting them to an online community often was the magic trick for getting someone to become computer literate, whether it was crocheting, classic cars, doo-wop music, whatever. I would connect people into having the oomph to become computer literate. And I think the same thing is true of searching with AI. Finding a very specific search about some minute detail that a person doesn't already know about a keen interest might do the trick. I haven't tried that yet. This question sort of stimulated me to think of what that would be, and that's what I'm going to try next. But the one thing I have found that wows people is image generation. Take a photo of them. No one loves anything better than the sound of their own name or their own image, and say, make this by Van Gogh, or Do it anime style. People love that stuff, and those would be my recommendations for that. Others here are prompt engineer maven, so I'm going to leave prompt engineering to them. But I will tell you, it also works to start simple and then just keep asking for revisions. If you don't have the wherewithal to come up with a giant prompt, do a simple one and then tell ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you're asking questions to, no, that's not what I meant. How about this? No, that's not what I wanted. How about this? And you'll get better and better answers. I do, of course, go and extend answers to previous sessions, as others have mentioned.
As others have said, I recommend that you use verbose, detailed prompts. And don't be shy to ask for revisions. Thank you, Marty. Also, I quite strongly recommend that you have some friends who will try out things like the Apple beta OSs and you about them, tell you about the problems that they encounter without risking your own data. So thank you to all the OMG guys to help me along that road. Marty?
You know, you never risk your own data if you've got good backups. So, you know, if you want to go out hunting in the wild with the beta, just make sure you got good backups. You know, those pictures that you really love and cherish, make sure they're not stored on your computer. Make sure they're stored in multiple places. But I digress. Start with the free ChatGPT account if you haven't been exposed to any of this. You sign up, and the way you sign up, you put your email address in, you create your own password, and that's your access to ChatGPT. Doesn't mean you have to use your email that is your common email that you use all the time. You could use an alternate email or create a Gmail account that you use just for ChatGPT. All of that will work better. Now, my general comment is don't treat it like a Google search, like, you know, tell me about this. You need to try to use, it will do that, but you need to try and give it as much information as you can. So, you know, Bob mentioned about using it as a way to figure out where the interesting places are along the road that he's driving to get to the Macstock conference. And I'm sure he's, you know, he had to put in a lot of information besides tell me the good things that I can find on the road when I get to, you know, from Macstock to here. So put in as much information as you can in terms of what you want to get out of it. Be intentional. So when you say, tell me the good places, you want to say, tell me the good places and give me the locations that I can search these on, or maybe a hyperlink to information about that particular location. So when you get the output, you get everything that you want out of it. And if it doesn't give you what you want, have a conversation with it saying, okay, that's a really nice list, but you didn't give me the hyperlinks I needed to be able to find this on a map or information about this particular place that I'm going to. So you correct it. I mean, you correct it politely and kindly, like you do with a child, and say, "No, that's close, but I really wanted this. Could you add this, please, to your next response?" And so you begin this conversational relationship with the LLM to kind of get it closer to what you really want, and that's the magic of it. Because you know, when you do Google searches, you get a whole page of possible links, and you don't know which one is what and what you want. And that's because it's just tossing it up against the wall and seeing what it can find and pulling down all the web pages it can find related to your what little you've put in there. With ChatGPT, it's a much more interactive, and that's where people get really hooked on it, because then you're like, what can I do with it next? And that's where you improve your own learning in the process too. So, we've got our final tips, and then we'll close up the show for tonight. So we'll start with Chris, and your
Okay, so my tip for tonight was going to be using the reader mode in Apple Safari browser. And I think we may have talked a little bit about this before, but if you look up in the URL field at the top of a browser window, there's a little icon on the left side. And if you click on that, if it's available, it will show you the reader, which cuts out all the ads. And for some people that have dyslexia, learning challenges, ADHD, and stuff, it's just a godsend to have just the pure text of what you're reading to be able to really concentrate on what you're doing. But so that's that. But I also was thinking of something else that Marty just said, and that is there's a feature that Apple came out with several years ago called Hide My Email. And what it does is it makes up an email address and forwards that email to your normal email account. And you may think, well, I don't go to weird places. I don't need something like that. But you'd be surprised. And there are a number of times, many websites that we start reading and stuff, they want our email address. I think, I don't know if I really want to give it my real email address. It's simple to just do the hide my email address, and Apple takes care of all the details in the background. The OS does. And this feature has improved over the years with recent OSs. So if you tried it before and didn't use it very much, you might try it again.
So what? So what you're saying, Chris? It's really hiding your real email address and giving pseudo or one of their own email addresses. I've seen it a number of times, and I'll try it and report back. Mine, and I mentioned it last week, and I haven't tested it yet, is Hold Assist on your iPhone. And the reason I didn't do it again today was I'm going on American Airlines from Cleveland to Raleigh, Durham, and I had I needed a phone call in order to allow me. I had my right code number and my email address, but I still couldn't log in. So, and I was waiting for quite a while, and I was afraid. Of course, they tell you they'll call you back, but I've had experiences when I wasn't there when they called, or they may not have called. So I planned for next week briefly to test with the receptionist at my church, or somebody who I know will check it out and make it work. So that's my tip for the week.
I appreciate you doing that experiment for us, Gary. I can't wait to hear the results. My tip is, I guess I'll call it push to ask. Okay, I never use a hands-free, hey so and so or so and so. Apple's original intelligent lady, intelligent to the point that she usually could understand what I was saying. But I found when it triggers, when it doesn't trigger, to be very awkward. So I go into the settings, I turn off voice recognition of hey so and so, and then I use a button on my phone or a button on my watch to trigger the query. On the watch, you push the digital crown. You don't have to say anything. You just ask your question, and I'll say it. Siri will answer. Hopefully, that didn't trigger anybody's devices. And on my phone, I push the power button, and I find that works wonders. I mean, I still have whatever issues are of the things that so and so is good at and the things they're not good at. But I want to check a score of a game. I want to set a timer. All the things that it knocks out of the park, I can do and see happen immediately.
Well, my tip is scanning into Apple Notes. My wife and I are trying to move away from the post office box that we have had for 20 years, now that we are only almost completely retired. we need to switch over to our street address and stop paying the post office $100 a year for a P.O. box. So I've been making a list about a list for the places where I have already switched my addresses. My wife saw it and said, gee, I ought to have a copy of that. But this list is on paper in a spiral notebook. So today I took a photo of it from within Apple Notes and then shared that note with her. And so now she has this same list that I have with all the places that I have so far changed my address. So scanning into Apple Notes can be very helpful. Marty?
Yeah. My suggestion or tip tonight is simply trying to get people to use Keynote more often than PowerPoint. I mean, it's a product that comes with your Mac and is available in iOS as well as, prominently in Mac OS. And so I searched to find out some things that you could do with Keynote or some things that you could do to kind of help your process with Keynote. And it will include a link on Apple support on basically how to add text in Keynote on a Mac. And the link will direct you to the website, which will give you a whole sense of Keynote. Well, this is the whole thing on Keynote in terms of how to use Keynote on the Mac in terms of creating presentations and slides. And I only did one section on adding text to Keynote. But if you hit at the table of contents on this website, you will be able to open up a bunch of things. So it includes stuff like replacing placeholder text, adding a text box if you want to do that, and then setting default text box for a presentation. Very useful resource. I gotta kind of give it to Chris, who keeps reminding us that Apple has these incredible support pages for its products. And if you want to see a video of how to do it, just ask your LLM. I want to do this with Keynote. Can you find me a video that will show me how to do this? And it will show you how to do it. And it'll probably back up a lot that you read in the support documents. So those are our tips for this week. And links that we have will be in the show notes for you to take a look at. You can email us at thepodtalknetwork@gmail.com. We appreciate your feedback, and from our viewers and listeners, your feedback helps us tailor programs to age-seasoned users like us who want to continue using their Macs and make their lives more enjoyable. Guys, do you have anything else to say for tonight? All right. Well, you can check us out at the website, thepodtalk.net, and lots of information on thepodtalk.net in terms of the different active podcasts that we do, and also some old inactive podcasts. You'll find out information about our hosts who are part of the Old Mac Gang, and all sorts of other wonderful things on thepodtalk.net. I don't want to leave without mentioning Macstock. Macstock is coming up July 11th, 12th, and 13th in Northern Illinois at Crystal Lake, Illinois, near Woodstock. And it will, you can find out all about Macstock at Macstockconferenceandexpo.com. I'll be there. Gary will be there. Bob will be there. All sorts of friends that you haven't met yet will be there. My son is coming along, and it's just a great experience. So take a look at Macstock Conference and Expo and the website, macstockconferenceandexpo.com. So let's do a wrap for this episode. Our next live episode will be on Wednesday, July 2nd at 9 p.m. Eastern Time through YouTube, where you can watch this crew at youtube.com/@Old Mac Gang. And that takes you to our channel page, and you can click on the live to see us there. You can always pick up the podcast or video later if you missed the live show. Share this with your friends and other Mac users. We are beginning to get a nice following and some nice reactions. That's been really pleasant. So thank you to listeners who make comments. And we had Armin Mitchell in the chat room tonight, and I'm sure he would love more of you to be in there too, to join him. So thanks for joining us through the chat room and through the live experience. Our music bed is by Philip Gross Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive, part of the Creative Commons. More information about this podcast and other ones can be found, as I said, at thepodtalk.net. Thanks to the group, Chris, Peter, Bob, and Gary. And thanks to you for being part of the Old Mac Gang. We will see you next time.